and welcome to Queer News Tonight. This is the world's first and only LGBTQ plus daily evening television news. We're broadcasting live, and then we're available on demand. And we're available on all smart televisions, including Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, and of course, YouTube and Facebook. It's time to queer up the news. It's Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023, and we're literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your important stories we are going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight.
This is the world's first live daily LGBTQ evening news show, literally out of the closet and into the headlines on Queer News Tonight with Al Ferguson.
I'm your anchor at Queer News Tonight, Al Ferguson. And this evening we bring you the news of and a perspective representing the LGBTQ plus community from South Florida, America, and across our planet.
This is the world's first and only unedited live LGBTQ plus evening news show. Whatever happens, unique in the LGBTQ plus news, you will see it and hear it.
Happening Out Television Network is a 501c3 nonprofit media platform in the television and radio model of PBS and NPR, but designed for our LGBTQ plus community.
We are part of one of the largest LGBTQ plus media companies in America, Hotspots Magazine and Happening Out Television Network.
Our magazine is celebrating 37 years of the LGBTQ plus experience, and our television news, talk, and entertainment shows support our mission to educate the LGBTQ plus and broader communities.
Well, let's begin tonight by welcoming Jasmine Pryce Lords. This drag queen is known as the plus-size Barbie and the bearded beauty. She is the Florida mother of the iconic House of Lords. She is also the entertainment director of a favorite of mine, Hamburger Mary's. You can catch her at many of the popular venues in South Florida. Good evening, Jasmine.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I'm also the newly crowned and the first South Florida's bearded queen. So very excited.
So that's
Thank
great.
You. All right.
And you have tinsel in your hair.
And I have, Christmas spirit. I can't let it go.
Can't let it go.
All right. Let's welcome anchor Christian C.J. Walden. He is the Vice President and Secretary of PRISM's Board of Directors, an undergraduate student at Florida Atlantic University, a writer at the South Florida Gay News, and a freelance photographer. Their motto is, quote, "I cannot sit idly by while people of color and the LGBTQ plus community face exasperated discrimination," unquote. Good evening, CJ.
Thank you, everyone, and Happy New Year. Let's make 2023 a one to remember. Let's welcome anchor Dr. Edward Summers. Dr. Summers currently serves as a primary therapist and program director at Eye Care Treatment Center in West Palm Beach and primary therapist at United Recovery Project, or the URP, in Lake Worth, Florida. Prior to working in the treatment industry, Dr. Summers was the founder and CEO of a New York-based nonprofit, The Thinkubator, an innovative and workforce development organization that crafts innovative strategies to complex local challenges that have global implications. Dr. Summers previously held faculty ranks in public administration and policy, political science, and executive leadership positions at some of the nation's preeminent universities such as Marist College, Union College, and Long Island University. Welcome, Dr. Summers.
Thank you, and it's great to be here. It's great to be in South Florida. I appreciate being on the show tonight. So let's welcome anchor Scott Galvin. He is the Executive Director of Safe Schools South Florida, providing a safe space for LGBTQ plus youth, a member of the North Miami City Council, the longest serving LGBTQ plus legislator in the state of Florida. He sits on the board of directors for AIDS Healthcare Foundation and volunteers with the Florida LGBTQ Democratic Caucus. Good evening, Scott, and welcome.
Thank you, Doctor, and I was glad to see that you were affiliated with Long Island University. I, too, was affiliated with Long Island, but it was a blue Long Island. We are the reporters for Queer News Tonight, and this evening we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ plus community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast, and here are the bullet points of the queer news for today, Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023.
Well, let's begin by queering up the USA view. A new poll shows majority of LGBTQ plus community think social media is harming democracy. About 2/3 of all Americans, 64%, say social media has a mostly negative effect on our democracy. Of that number, more than 80% of conservatives and Republicans believe our democracy is under attack from social media. But most disturbing of all is that as many as 54% of the liberal mindset of the LGBTQ plus community also believe our democracy is harmed by social media. This is the most negative number in the history of social media since the formation of the internet. The top reasons for this opinion by the poll is explained as misinformation, the hate and harassment they see on social media. They also have concerns about users believing everything they see or read or not being sure about what to believe. Additionally, they bemoan social media's role in fomenting partisanship, polarization, and the creation of echo chambers. Interestingly, the younger you are, the more optimistic you become about social media. An industry generating hundreds of billions of dollars is largely the Wild West. A huge issue is virtually no government regulation. The only real regulations comes from the Communications Decency Act, infamous Section 230, saying, quote, "No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider," end quote. Essentially, this means that social media platforms have no responsibility for the content on their platform. You do. While at first glance that is an embracement for free speech, it really is also an embracement that the government has done nothing in the 27 years that this law was passed. In the last century, before there were even any of today's major social media platforms. In fact, this law was passed when less than 20% of Americans had ever even been on the World Wide Web. The LGBTQ plus community is literally living in the Wild West online. This is not a new phenomenon, however. Up until the 1970s, doctors, medical doctors, did advertisements that smoking was good for you. Then the government had comprehensive safety warnings added and an advertising policy changes were implemented against smoking that literally saved millions of lives. It happened again in the 1980s when no car required a seatbelt until laws occurred in 1986 to make them mandatory. It happened because studies proved the danger and the federal government, despite car lobbies, took action. In this last year, there were more than 20 attempts have been made in Congress to regulate social media, and 100% have not even made it to the floor. The most common explanation as to why, according to experts, is the social media lobby. A final question on what is happening to the LGBTQ plus community is social media is the why. Just this week, Facebook insider and whistleblower Frances Hogan answered that question. Profits. Like tobacco in the 1960s and 70s and seatbelts in the 70s and 80s, it was not about safety, but rather about money. Hogan said, quote, "If Elon Musk wants Twitter to be a public square, he should make its algorithms open source," end quote. Translation: social media sites have every incentive to start the fight on your own feed, especially from the broad community against marginalized communities of LGBTQ+, people of color, religious minorities, and women. A like is not nearly as valuable as a dislike. Studies show angry emojis get 5 times the preference by algorithms because they are more likely to be clicked, and clicks generate advertising profits. Your anger against trans, drag queens, gay marriage, and children in schools are far more likely to be shared, and that makes money. So why today's poll results surprise us? We really should be surprised. The study is fascinating. We're not surprised that 80% of Republicans and conservatives think that the web is out for them, that social media is out for them. That we've heard that and heard that. What does catch us by surprise is the majority of LGBT and liberal-minded thinking also think that social media is bad for democracy.
Yeah.
It is breathtakingly, it brings us to a stop from the standpoint of, okay, now we're all basically agreed, not to the same number as the conservatives, but we're all agreeing to the same thing. We don't like social media. And then we spend 8 hours a day.
Yeah. I mean, I can attest to that as an elected official because, you know, folks, my constituency tends to be more liberal by definition. And of course, they would be the first to pounce on the conservatives and say, how dare they do the echo chamber? They're just not thinking anything through. And then they do the exact same thing. Somebody will post their opinion, and rather than folks ask me whether that's truth or the case, they're echoing it and running with it, and it's frustrating.
I imagine, Jasmine, I turn to you. I imagine as a drag queen in today's environment, do you get much hate in social media, or are you living in a good enough bubble where it's a friendly environment for you?
I mean, I don't get really much hate outside from, you know, outside things. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen Hamburger Mary's. As a show director, I'm a part of all the accounts and stuff, so I do see some of the things that come through there. But for the most part, we are blessed at this point to not really be experiencing a lot of that.
What do we do about this? The poll is also a reflection that the word phrasing here of the support is democracy. It's not that it's not selling our products, it's not selling our coffee mugs, it's not allowing me to reconnect with grandma. It is saying that it is damaging our democracy. And this is a phenomenon that we've seen that really seriously began in 2015 and 16, frankly, when Donald Trump ran for president, and all bets were off in terms of the way we would speak to each other. Yeah. It gave us permission to sit and do and say whatever we want. So if these are the facts, which they are in terms of what Americans and LGBT think, what do we do about it? Any thoughts of?
Yeah, so, you know, I think what was very startling in what you've reported was the fact that 100% of the conversations in Congress did not make it to the floor. The fact that there are some initiatives to regulate the industry, but yet because of the lobby, it hasn't made it to the floor. It hasn't even made it to the floor to discuss, to debate. And so we almost have to think about the role that lobbyists play in our democracy, right? And this is a long standing conversation of how do we limit the lobbyists in making policy, right? President Obama, when he was president, tried to limit the lobbyists, right? And their role and influence in public policy. However, we really need to re-bring those conversations back up about how do we limit lobbyists, right? To allow these conversations to be had on a Congress floor, because lobbyists are a powerful group, right? They have the resources that allow our elected officials to get elected, right? And so if they have that control, we will never make progress on regulating the industry. So we almost have to limit the role of lobbyists and their role in trying to bring forth this topic.
But how could you even limit them in the first place if they're giving the resources?
The limit is easy. People have to actually start participating in democracy themselves on a, at least a weekly basis. I mean, lobbyists, people get lazy. The electorate gets lazy. They don't want to do any research. They don't want to go to a community meeting. It's easier to just jump on social media and see what somebody else is saying and, oh, this must be fact. People could check lobbyists in an instant, but it means they'd have to do some work. This
is a story that I think in 2023, we're obviously early in the year. This is a story that we probably are going to talk about in many different inclinations all year long. As our situation, especially in LGBT, gets worse for drag queens, for parental right conversations and what's happening in our schools, and Governor DeSantis becomes bolder and bolder and bolder in the steps forward to 2024. I suspect we're going to be talking about this a lot. The last observation that I want to point out that I think is very interesting is Article 230 is really the only legislative control on the internet. Twitter can do, Facebook can do, Instagram can do, etc., and so on, what they do with impunity. They can't do this exact same responsibility that Fox News even has, or Newsmax has, or NBC, or MSNBC. They have responsibilities, at least in minimal standards, for libel. You do not on the internet. And this act is the reason why. Because before Facebook really launched, or Twitter launched, or etc. and so on, this is the only guidance, federal law, which says you're not responsible for content. So if I have a page and Scott comes on and says something incredibly incendiary and libelous and an outright lie, that's okay, because I have no responsibility for it. And many argue that if federal laws amended 230 to say, wait, we're going to make internet news and information in the same platform standard as print journalism and television journalism, then things would begin to improve. But we can't even get that to the floor of Congress, because the lobbyists that represent social media are spending so much time and influence that they prevent this. So they stir the fight and they keep the fight going. And why? That's what we're reporting on tonight. This reflects it's damaging democracy, and we believe it is damaging democracy. And why? Not for any greater good other than money. That's what we're learning. That's why we give the comparisons of smoking in the 70s and seatbelts for cars in the 80s. It seems to be a very similar situation, and something that we must address.
Next, we queer up South Florida and Florida. Queer News Tonight celebrates 3 years as the world's first daily LGBTQ evening news show. 3 years ago, this week, on January 6, 2020, a new show was born. It started with a small set at the World's Aid Museum in the heart of Wilton Manors. Originally, the show was called Q News Tonight to reference the queer community without using a word that some might felt be offensive. The show began with only 3 anchors: lead anchor Al Ferguson, actor and geek culture personality Napoleon Plays, and political activist Aaron Darr. 2 weeks later, on January 23rd, we became one of the first LGBTQ+ media outlets to report on a new virus that had appeared in Wuhan, China, that the WHO issued a warning about. On March 19th, we presented our first special edition episode called our Q&A on coronavirus. It featured Fort Lauderdale Mayor Dean Trantelis, Dr. Bo Sharma from Cannes Community Health, and infectious disease specialist Dr. Stephen A. Renee. It focused on how this new pandemic would affect the LGBTQ+ community. Starting April the 1st, Aaron Darr would be replaced by Misty Eyes, and Q News Tonight would report on the diagnosis of It's Happening Out host chef Josie and Ron Bernensky with COVID-19 and Ron's eventual death from the disease. In June of 2020, the rise of the online hate group QAnon would cause social media algorithms to flag Q News Tonight as part of their network, leading to the relaunch of the show as Queer News Tonight. The show has continued to document historic events around the world, and specifically how and why they matter to the LGBTQ+ community since then. I'm really glad that name change was made from Q News Tonight to Queer News Tonight because of QAnon. I didn't even know it was called Q News Tonight. It was a very good change.
You know, it's interesting in the longevity. Scott's been around for a long time. When I was the principal lead anchor when the show launched, nothing like this had ever been done. Daily news. We had no teleprompters. We're in teleprompters tonight for our stories and talking. Probably people have figured it out, but when we started Queer News, there were no teleprompters. So the anchor told the story with no written word. And we would tell the story with the headline and tell the story, and then we would have conversation about the story. It had never been done before. It's very interesting that Q News Tonight, Queer News Tonight, will forever be remembered as launching at the same time that coronavirus launched in the United States, because on the exact same days it was beginning in Seattle, Washington, and what happened. One of the things I'm very proud of, and as we celebrate this milestone that's going to happen this week, is Queer News Tonight never stopped broadcasting. We broadcast every single night through a pandemic. We're here tonight. Lots of different protocols. We went through a process where Chef Josie, by the way, the owner of Bubbles and Pearls, as a participant anchor, was one of the first people in South Florida that was diagnosed with coronavirus and continued to test positive for 46 days. Now we think back on that and going, how is that possible? Because we know now that that was not possible. But she continued to test positive and was in quarantine isolation for 46 days. And Ron Brunensky, one of our anchors, was at the show and 2 days later tested positive. And Queer News Tonight and It's Happening Out cast, to my knowledge, to the best of my knowledge, in South Florida had the first collection of advanced testing of coronavirus that I'm aware of in South Florida. We were all quarantined in our individual homes, and a nurse came to our houses and apartments for us to test. That's when Josie was identified, and the reason why that happened is because 2 days after one of our broadcasts, Ron Brunensky went into emergency and never came out. And died approximately 40 days later on incubator. And then the countless stories that we have done. We reported in 2022, we did approximately 2,200 LGBT stories in 2022.
Good job, Al.
And I always appreciated that Queer News continued to every day bring the stats of what's happening around the globe and around the, you kept it at the forefront of people's minds, even as it had started to, every day for probably 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
So
we didn't stop until the first quarter of 22, really in terms of comfort. So we congratulate everyone that's participating. We congratulate the people that are sitting at this table. We're a nonprofit, first off. We're a 501c3. There are more than 200 voices, like the voices and faces that you see at this table, that represent and tell news all through the years, and they represent everything that the diversity of our community does. Scott and I represent one face, you represent a different face, you represent a different face, you represent a different face. The other thing that I think is really a celebration for Queer News Tonight and this anniversary that will happen this week is the entire show has been turned over to different representation in our community. Scott was the first organization that we embraced for what was happening on from Tallahassee on Don't Say Gay, and we do a television broadcast of Queer News Tonight with all high school students, and the one of the anchors is a senior at Fort Lauderdale High School interviewing the gay mayor of the city of Fort Lauderdale. That is a triumphant moment to have 6 students, gay, LGBT students. We've done all trans cast, talking about all trans stories, Black, Latino, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's been quite an experiment, and now it's moved to Apple Television and Roku. And from those humble first starts at the World AIDS Museum on Wilton Drive, quite an amazing
congratulations and thank you, because what you've created has given us all a platform and allows us to use our voice and to be a part of something bigger. So, congratulations to you.
To all of us.
So much.
Absolutely. And I think that a big part of this is that young people get to see themselves on the television.
Yeah.
And for such a long time, I'm a young kid of the 80s. And so for a long time, I did not see people that looked like me. And so all of a sudden now we have a platform where we can see people that look like us, right?
Yeah.
And we don't have to hide. We don't have to hide who we are, because we can identify with that person on a television screen. So I think it's amazing amazing, and congratulations to this 3-year anniversary. It's pretty a great accomplishment.
Yeah.
We're not going anywhere.
We're not going anywhere. Did you hear that, Governor DeSantis? We're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
All right. Now we queer up drag culture. New study shows 2022 had greatest number of anti-drag attacks in history. Protests of drag performances, particularly drag story hour events, have increased sharply across the U.S., even in New York City. The birthplace of the modern LGBTQ plus rights movement is not immune to the surge of anti-drag protests that has swept across the U.S. this year. In December 2022, there have been at least 2 such protests in the NYC. The latest occurred outside a public library in the borough of Queens, where a drag story hour event for children was scheduled. Shakar Krishnan, a New York City council member who represents parts of the borough, estimated there were 500 protesters, with counter-protesters far outnumbering their anti-drag counterparts. Last year, the LGBTQ plus media advocacy group, GLAAD, issued a report stating that there had been more than 140 incidents of anti-LGBTQ plus protests and threats targeting drag events across 47 states in 2022, with Texas, North Carolina, and Illinois reporting the most such protests. Some of the protests the organization found had been organized by white nationalist groups, including the Proud Boys, who in some cases have shown up to drag story hour events armed. The Crowd Counting Consortium, a public interest and scholarly project that documents crowds and contention in the U.S., found a sharp increase in the number of anti-LGBTQ plus demonstrations across the U.S. over the past 2 years. This is terrifying for someone like me who I have left my boy job and now this is what I do full time. I also work at our house. So as you know, there has been events that we've had some pressure on us. It is really crazy to think that as all we're trying to do is entertain and uplift the people around us and put on a show and have a moment where people can come and forget about the BS in the world, and we're being met with such crazy outside hate.
Jasmine, I have to, I have to ask you, first off, how fabulous, I think, we're here in South Florida reporting to the nation about the statistics of being 2022, unfortunately being the worst in attacks on the drag community in history. And the person that tells that story, reports that story as a drag queen. I think that's fabulous. But specifically for you, especially as a bearded drag queen, you're a very specialized look. With what we have seen in the increase in 2022, are you fearful for your own safety? How do you process what we're watching around the country?
Honestly, I'm not really fearful for my safety personally, but as a show director and everything that I've done, I'm very concerned for my staff, my cast, the people that I work with, and making sure that I'm providing them a safe place to be at work. When I'm scheduling somebody and there's things going on in the community, I'm very observant of what's happening in the bars. I'm checking the doors. I find myself looking because I'm concerned for everybody who's now in this place that I have asked them to be here. I find that now it wasn't ever a thought, and now in the back of my mind, I'm always like, are my girls okay? Am I doing everything we can? Is there anything that we can do differently to protect our community? And I don't think we've ever had to think that way, not for a long time at least, but it's definitely a concern now.
You know, the challenge I see is the city that I was born in, New York City, which is known as, you know, the modern movement for the LGBTQ plus movement. You know, the fact that we've had a merge of these type of protests against our community is just, it's really shameful. But what gives us a glimmer of hope, I think just a small glimmer of hope, is the fact that there are counter-protests, right? And in your story, when you reported, Jasmine, the fact that the counter-protests outnumber the protesters, right? So that is the glimmer of hope that we have, that there are people out there that are still standing with us, with our community, and will not tolerate this emergence of protests that we're seeing against us. So I have some hope, and it's amazing that you're reporting on this story. Thank you.
Yeah, like I'm sorry. Like I feel like in certain situations you can be afraid, you can be quiet, you can step up, you can whatever you need to do, and I'm not gonna quit doing drag. I'm not going to stop performing. I'm not going to stop being a beacon in my community. I have a lot of people who, like I said, I have shows where people come out, I was having a terrible day and this, turned my mood around. And that's why I do it. So I love to connect with people and give people that light. And I'm not going to turn myself off because of what some crazy people may or may not do. I'm going to continue to show up. I'm going to continue to be a voice. I'm going to continue to do what I do.
And I'm sorry.
No, it's nice. That's
yeah, I also feel obligated to ask from the standpoint of, from your seat and the attack that is specifically, this is a broad LGBTQ community attack. It's not just on drag queens. Drag queens are being attacked just like students are in schools for a specific purpose. But what do you think is going to come from this? If you were going to look at the Jasmine Pryce crystal ball, which is probably pretty good, where do you think all of this is going?
I think whenever we've seen situations where they've tried to spotlight our community and attack us, we've always come out victorious. I think at the end of the day, they're just putting a more focus on our community, and all they're going to see is all the great things that we have to offer at the end of the day. All the people who are maybe not standing up are going to see their friends be put in these terrible situations, and we're going to gain a lot more allies. And I think this is really going to help us to show who is behind us, and people are going to be shocked when this all goes in the right direction.
It's interesting to me because at the end of the day, you talk about our house and the threat against the liquor license, and what we watched about the RuPaul shows of Peter and Murray's national tour attacks over the Christmas holidays. Children being present at a drag show is not illegal. There's no court in America that is going to conclude that it is illegal for children to be at a drag show. That is impossible. It cannot be identified as adult entertainment unless there is something that is sexually explicit. Being a woman in drag as a male is not sexually explicit. Otherwise, tomorrow, the state of Florida and the state of Texas would close all of our Hooters. It is not legal. And so we're going to break through the ridiculousness of what we are watching. It's just a question of how we go about continuing to implement it.
I really want to say it, and I don't want to have to say it, but I think I have to say it, is that we can't succumb to their level. That if they're going to be attacking us, killing people, lighting cars on fire, we can't drop down to their level. We have to shine hope. You need to continue to inspire. We need to continue showing up and going out, but not drop to what they're doing. And
I also feel like, to be transparent, I do think there are some numbers that I do, there's some performances that I do that if there are kids in the audience, I make the choice not to do that song, right? So I think if I'm working at a late night show like Hamburger Mary's with a 10 o'clock seating, I'm imagining there's not kids in the audience. So that might be the show I might do something a little bit more crass. But that's something, as being a professional, you should be aware of your audience. If you're doing a young brunch that is family friendly, like we do Prides, at Pride shows, there's certain songs you don't do because there's families in the audience. And I think it's just the same thing as entertainers. We do need to have a little bit of accountability and make sure that we're holding ourselves to a standard. If you're working at a family event or you're working at a place that there's children, maybe that's not the show to get naked. Maybe there's a way that you can, in this situation, if you're working a late night bar show at a club, then there shouldn't be kids there. So that's the number that you can do that there. I think it's a little bit of, we have to hold ourselves accountable as well. If you're giving them the gun to shoot you with, you're giving them the ammunition, at that point, we need to take a little bit of accountability as entertainers.
Jasmine, I can't agree more. As a dad of a 10-year-old, I've always taken my kid to drag shows in New York City. To me, I think it's celebrating diversity, right? And showing him that we have such a diverse, vast world out there. We have people of all types, sizes, colors, backgrounds, that it's important just to show him that diversity. And my 10-year-old son is the most openness kid in the world. He loves everybody. He's so much more cultured for it. He's so much more learned. This is like a spectacular young person, and I think part of it is me showing him the diversity of the world. He is, one summer, his camp counselor said to me, they said, "Where did you get this kid from?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says,
I ordered him.
Yeah, that's right.
That was on time.
It was amazing what they said to me. They said, he is the kid that is very quiet, but is the most giving. He will give his lunch, he will share his lunch with kids in the lunchroom. If he has money, and when he buys snacks, he buys it not just for himself, he buys it for other people. Like, he just embraces everyone. And that kid that no one talks to, he's always the first one to go over and embrace that person. That new kid that came into the school for the first time, he is the one to go over and bring him into his crowd and to like enculturate him into the school. And I think part of it is just raising them. Quite frankly, my kid was raised around a lot of queers. I'm queer, no surprise. But I think a lot of it, like his upbringing, was because of how I raised him and who I raised him around, that he is becoming who he is today.
That is so fascinating to me because I know Scott's the expert at Safe Schools South Florida. That is the ultimate parental choice. That's the ultimate parental rights. The parent is going to make the right decision. And it is doublespeak and it is gaslighting to say, oh, we're giving you parental rights and parental choice by taking your rights away from you. Right. Which is what I just heard you say.
You don't want your kids to go. Don't bring them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Next, we queer up politics. Governor DeSantis offered Libs of TikTok creator his home to hide after identity was revealed. After her identity as a creator of the Libs of TikTok account was revealed, Cheyenne Redcheck received a phone call from Ron DeSantis' team, inviting her to stay at the Florida governor's mansion if she felt unsafe. The real estate agent made her first public, non-disguised appearance last month on Tucker Carlson's Today, putting a face to the name behind a conservative account, which frequently mocks liberals and promotes anti-LGBTQ rhetoric. Back in April, Taylor Lorenz of the Washington Post published a story about Raycheck that revealed her identity, which Raycheck said led to her receiving numerous threats. DeSantis reached out to her to offer her a safe haven. While talking to Fox Tucker Carlson, she said, quote, when I was doxxed, someone from Ron DeSantis' team called me, end quote. As per her interview, the call was to give her a message from Ron DeSantis in which he offered her to stay in his mansion in case she needs a safe place. While Raycheck did not take DeSantis up on his offer, she expressed her gratitude for his gesture on the show. She said, quote, I was almost in tears. He took time out of his extremely busy schedule to send someone to call me to make sure I'm safe. It was incredible. I don't even have the words for it, end quote. You know, this is a very interesting story. You know, Governor DeSantis, he just gave his speech today, but it continues on the rhetoric. And by him offering his gesture to a person who has blatantly, you know, posted stories about discriminatory actions against our community, it just continues the rhetoric on and on and on. It's old news for me at this point, to be honest with you. We need something new for 2023. I'm just tired of these blatant attacks against our community. They need to find some new bylines. Her, you know, this woman who's created this Libs of TikTok, you know, I think it's just overrated. And I'm quite frankly tired. We talked about democracy. Hopefully this mobilizes more people to stand up against people like this and participate in our democracy.
I'm not comfortable with that rosy outlook, and I kept my tongue in the last segment because I didn't want to be that guy, because I usually come on here and I'm that guy. It is absolutely going to get worse in this nation for all of us before it gets better. The attacks on our warehouse, the attacks on the drag queen Christmas, that's a step ahead of raiding gay clubs again. They'll come up with some sort of, you know, they're testing the waters. Oh, well, it wasn't appropriate for kids.
What can we get away with?
What can we get away with? I guarantee you, in the year 2024, because DeSantis is more than likely going to be president, they're going to be shutting down gay clubs and arresting the patrons. And we're all like, you know, I'm that old guy who remembers what it was like in the 70s and people running away from Anita Bryant. We're back there again. And so they're not, you might be tired, I might be tired, but we can't afford right now to say, well, let's just hope they turn the page to come up with something else, because they're not going to. This is working for them. You know, Raycheck's an absolute coward for launching her grenades from the, you know, the anonymity that she used to enjoy. But that works, and they're going to keep coming at us this year and next year, and we can't afford to cross our fingers and hope it goes away. It's only going to go away if we somehow
Yeah, and for me, I think that my tiredness is about like hoping that people mobilize against it. So that's what I'm tired of, and I hope that our community bands together and our supporters band together.
Do you think, I'm curious to that observation, from what you saw through the lion's share of 2022. 2022 for LGBT in Florida especially is going to be earmarked for the anti-woke, woke comes to die here in Florida, and that soundbite, and don't say gay. Do you think the citizens of Florida rallied against that in the way that you would have hoped? How about the LGBTQ?
I was a little disappointed, and I would have hoped that there would be more mobilization. You know, what I've learned being in Florida almost a year now, and I'm coming from New York, is that just the level of general engagement in general, it lacks compared to other places like big cities like New York. Just in general, I work with people who just don't even know what's going on in the world. And just are really not knowledgeable. And I think that there's a sense of, I'm in sunny Florida, I stick to myself, I'm really not concerned with major, it doesn't affect me, NIMBY, not in my backyard, I don't really care about it.
The famous story in 1940 in Nazi Germany, I never raised my hand, I never raised my hand, I never raised my hand until they came for me.
That's right. So that's very disappointing, and I've been disappointed by that.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, especially people who are like Florida natives, like we've never really had a lot of things happen here as far as the hate firsthand. Like in my entire queer life, as I've been here my entire life, I've never really had to go through any of this. So I don't think we've had that same pressure you felt as a New Yorker, where you grew up and you were living in an environment where it's such historic and you remember what had happened. And that wasn't really a thing here. I was gay in 15 and holding my boyfriend's hand in school and going down to, South Beach, and it just wasn't a thing. And now it's becoming that. So I think our community will continue to learn. But like I said, I think, since the time we were children, I think we've gotten a lot more supporters. I think we've educated, like you as a parent, you're teaching your child to be a lot more accepting. And I just think our numbers are greater than people realize. It just, like you said, we need to find a way that we can mobilize and get them out there. Yeah. But I feel confident that we are a lot stronger than people know. And we just need to get to that point where we're getting there. And I don't think we've had a reason to. But when we stand up, we come big. So be careful.
Yeah.
They're popping our bubble because South Florida, like I'll always say, is like a bubble. And they're popping that bubble, and it's time that we pop back.
Yeah. One thing that I personally want to be really clear on, the fear of being outed. Well, first off, Chaya, why were you so secretive in the first place? Mm-hmm. You are a member of an uber right-wing, almost fascist journalism organization. Almost. There could be arguments. Why were you doing it secretly? Libs for TikTok is an LGBT organization that many in the United States have called a terrorist group. And that many of the commitments of what Libs of TikTok has done is to say, oh, we're gay, we're gay, we're gay, to give ourselves a pass of the gay bashing that is getting ready to take place. Now, first off, that's probably an absolute fact. And you kind of prove that by your anonymity of doing that. And so when you were outed and you go on my best friend, Tucker, and you go on his show and you do what you do. And the one thing, that you almost cried, Ron DeSantis was using you. He was using you, and he was using you against the LGBTQ community to say, come on down to Florida and come and stay in the governor's mansion. Thank goodness you made the decision not to do that, because it would probably be something that you would regret for the rest of your life if you have any moral conscience. But the one thing that I want to say as a counterbalance is all of the people that threatened you, they are completely wrong. You have every right to express your opinion in any way that you want to express your opinion. I do not agree with 99.9% of every single thing that comes out of your mouth, except you have the right to say it. Okay. And for anyone to threaten your life because you said it, I don't understand how, if it's coming from gay, if it's coming from liberal, if it's coming from Democrats, if it's coming from Biden supporters, I don't know where it's coming from. But wherever it's coming from, how is that any different than Proud Boys on Las Olas Boulevard or attacks on our drag queens? I don't see any difference at all. And that's our problem. We have become so polarized in Florida and in America that we can't express opinion and have conversation. It must be either or. And as long as we have only one experience in the entire history of the Republic where it's been either or. and that was 1859. And it created, I'm going to keep my slaves or I'm not. And millions of people were affected in a civil war as a result of it. This feels so much like that. So you should not have been attacked. You should not have had your life threatened. You should not have an offer from the governor of Florida, who is going to try to be the president of the United States, to say, come and sleep in the Lincoln bedroom in Tallahassee. It's inappropriate, and I'm glad you didn't do it. And you shouldn't be threatened for expressing free speech. But my goodness, libs of TikTok, what you're representing is really, really, really despicable. And one day, history is going to show how despicable your free speech really is. You have the right. It's just the wrong words, in my opinion.
Well, now we queer up lesbian culture. The community supports lesbian-owned bakery after vandals repeatedly destroy rainbow flags. Community members have rallied around a store owned by a married same-sex couple after vandals repeatedly tore down rainbow outside of their business. Shortly before the December 7th opening of the Bee's Knees General Store and Bakery in the Canadian province of Nova Scotia, the bakery's owners, Sue Littleton and her newlywed wife, Candace Zana, found that the rainbow flag outside of their storefront had been ripped down. Littleton told the CBC, quote, "We thought, well, it's just kids being mischievous in the middle of the night. We didn't think too much of it," end quote. But then their replacement flags were vandalized 3 more times. The most recent time occurred on Christmas Eve, and on that occasion, someone ripped down their pride flag and their Mi'kmaq flag, a Christian flag representing regional Native Canadians who first came into contact with European settlers. Whoever ripped down the flags also placed human feces on top of them. The business owners installed security cameras, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are investigating these acts as vandalism and possible hate crimes. But Littleton and Zana said that they experienced an incredible outpouring of support from the local community since news of the vandalism spread. Zana said the support has come from all sorts of different demographics. Well, you know, it's nice to know that the bigotry is not limited to the 50 states. You know, it's just, it's got to be frustrating. You know, small business owners work hard. This is certainly, it's not like a big conglomerate, some big corporation. You know, here they are just trying to scrape together a living, and somebody comes along and attacks their business, and you know, they don't have a big bank account probably to turn to fix things up and to put put security at the front door. But yeah, you know, going back to the story we just had, you know, again, it's anonymous bullying. It's that person on the internet who hides their identity. It's the person who comes in the middle of the night. You know, that's our opponent's tactic, to hide and throw stones, but never show their hands.
I'm glad the community showed up for those bakers, but what if they didn't, is my question. What if the community didn't show up and they had nowhere else to turn to? They had no support. And I think that's why it is important that the community always needs to show up, that we need to care for others, even when our bubble isn't directly being popped.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I think, CJ, that is a bullseye. And the reason that's a bullseye is because if we don't decide that we're going to stand up for the 2 lesbians in Canada, in Nova Scotia, what are we going to stand up for? What are our values? And if we go, you know, I don't need to tell you in terms of trans, we're talking about it left and right. The LGBTQ community, you know, Wilton Drive, I live in Wilton Drive, you work on Wilton Drive. Wilton Drive cannot be privileged white gay guys. It just can't. It can't. Period. The end. There's no other end of the equation. The only thing can be is that we're a community that stands up for community, which means we're going to stand up for the lesbians, and we're going to stand up for the trans kids, and we're going to stand up for women in our community, and we're going to stand up for people of color, and that's, you just hit the bullseye. Thank goodness the community stood up.
I think the beautiful thing is, like they said, it was from all demographics. So it wasn't just the gay community. There's only so much that we can do. If we don't have allies outside of our community who are willing to reach in and support us, we can only get so far. And to me, that's the beautiful thing. Yes, the gay community stood up and supported them, wonderful, but that people from different communities outside of their own stood up there and also supported them, to me, that speaks volumes.
And we need to remember to do the same when some of our brethren are attacked in the future. I want to see the LGBT organizations front and center at immigration press conferences when people are denouncing the way that immigrants are treated in this country. Too often we still stay in our little bubble, and the LGBT stand up at the LGBT press conference, but nowhere else. We need to change that.
Yeah. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think we have to always remember that famous quote from Martin Luther King. And we do have to stand up no matter what it is, because, if it's trans, gay, black, whatever it is, Hispanic, immigrant, I mean, all our rights, like if we have, it's incumbent upon us to stand up because it's a threat to limiting all of our rights.
It's interesting. Just one final thought, because I know CJ is dying to jump in for the next story. But it's interesting to me that if, this concept that is being discussed, that if we don't support each other in our community first and encourage people outside, you hit it, another bullseye in terms of allies. If allies do not support the LGBTQ community and we do not support ourselves inside, principally the hate that we're watching in Florida, in Tallahassee for sure, in America, the attacks that we're seeing are overwhelmingly formulated by white, older men. If we don't stand up for each other, by the way, I fit into that category as white, older man.
Wasn't gonna say it.
Exactly. At the end of the day, if we don't stand up for each other, I'm good. I'll be okay. Scott's going to be okay. But the point is, if we don't stand up for each other, those people win. That's their strategy. I'm afraid of all of the diversity that's coming up because it threatens my white, elderly gayness. And that's why we have to stand up and support each other.
Next, we queer up South Florida and Florida. Florida is the fastest growing state in America for the first time in 65 years. Is LGBTQ+ part of the reason? Florida is now the fastest growing state in the union, according to the U.S. Census Bureau's estimates. Between 2021 and 2022, Florida's population increased by 1.9% to 22,244,823. The last time the Sunshine State earned the distinction was in 1957. Before my own mom was even born. Florida is also the third most populous state behind only California and Texas. Idaho, the previous fastest growing state, has a rather small population of 1,893,410 people, roughly the population of Florida's very own Broward County. And Florida's population density has increased by 800%, skyrocketing from 51.7 people per square mile in 1950, when we were the 29th most densely populated state, to 401.4 per square mile in 2020. While the population rate was at its lowest in 2020, during the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic, 2021 and 2022 saw an influx of new residents from other areas of the country. Craig Stugnucky, CEO and president of the related ISG brokerage firm, says, quote, "I'm amazed by the number of New Yorkers who are moving here permanently. They're not just buying second homes."
All right, now we queer up entertainment. One of Barbara Walters' greatest regrets was pushing Ricky Martin to come out gay. The late legendary TV broadcaster Barbara Walters said that she regretted pressuring Ricky Martin to come out in an infamous interview. During the interview on The View in 2000, Walters refused to drop her line of questioning after grilling Martin on the rumors surrounding his sexuality, asking, and I quote, "Do the rumors hurt? How do you handle them?" Martin dodged the unquote. Martin dodged the question by replying, quote, "Sexuality and homosexuality should not be a problem for anybody. I think that sexuality is something that each individual should deal with in their own way, and that's all I have to say about that," unquote. But Walters, who died on December 30th, 2022, age 93, refused to let it slide, asking again, quote, "Well, you could stop these rumors. You could say, as many artists have, yes, I am gay, or you could say, no, I'm not. Or you could leave it as you are, ambiguous," unquote. 10 years later, Walters was asked by the Toronto Star what the one regret of her career was, and she said, quote, "In 2000, I pushed Ricky Martin very hard to admit if he was gay or not, and the way he refused to do it made everyone decide that he was. A lot of people say that destroyed his career, and when I think back on it now, I feel it was an inappropriate question."
Question or talk about your sexual orientation. You must be aware of these matters.
Of course.
Okay. Do they hurt? How do you handle them?
The word says it. Intimacy. Sexuality and homosexuality should not be a problem for anybody. I think that sexuality is something that each individual should deal with in their own way. And that's all I have to say about that.
Well, you could stop these rumors. You could say, as many artists have, yes, I am gay. Or you could say, no, I'm not. Or you could leave it as you are, ambiguous.
Well, that's definitely awkward to sit back and watch. He was beautiful, first of all. But yeah, I mean, we make mistakes, we learn, we grow, and it was a different time. And, I think a part of it is, where our community and where the world has been, and that 10-year difference from when she had that first interview to the next. And, I think also it's amazing for somebody of her stature to have the ability to look back and just say that was a mistake and own up to it.
I think the mistake was him not coming out directly. I mean, when you put yourself forward in the public eye, there's a reason I did it as a candidate running for office. I didn't want somebody using it against me as some sort of weapon.
Wait, you're gay?
Well, only on days it ended wide. But when you're stepping into the public arena, you have to know you're going to take shots.
Right.
And I don't mean shots of Blue Long Island. People are going to come at you, and you should be prepared to answer those things and not be evasive. And I recognize it was, 10, 15, 20 years ago. There was a little difference in what was going on.
23 years.
But, he was happy to cash the royalty check. So with, great power comes great.
We've been following this story closely of Censor Death. If he's going to comment on it. So far, to the best of my knowledge, he has not. But we're really watching closely to see, is he going to say, yeah, I forgive her and this is all past, because this is quite a story. Yeah. You watch the video, you just report that story. It's also unseemly. Mm-hmm. It feels like, wait, what time period is this? Because it was a whole different time for her to do that.
It feels gross, but it's good that she said, I'm sorry, or that was inappropriate of me.
Yeah.
I mean, also, if you think about, Ellen was beloved and she was a huge star, and then the moment she came out, drastically had a huge change in the public eye. In 2000, how many out queer people were there? Except for him, wanting to, like you said, we should know, it's obvious that it's going to be a thing, it's going to come out. Yeah. But for the most part, how many people who we knew when you were growing up, we knew, but it was never talked about.
One other thing that relates to this that I think is really interesting. Ricky Martin is an era of great interest for me, probably for you too. He's probably too old for the rest of you, definitely at the table. But the interesting thing is, in your story, when you say it may have severely damaged his career, it severely damaged his career. He went from Madonna boy toy, playing this character, which is, I think, what I hear your point, to being something else. And America just wasn't ready to embrace someone as attractive as that, not being straight. And as a result, it really dramatically affected his career.
I think it impacted his career, but it's probably changed his life. I mean, he has kids now. It's definitely probably changed his life for the better. I remember just coming out, I was in the closet because I worked at a Catholic college that I graduated from, and I finally came out in 2011 after Tyler Clementi killed himself from Rutgers College. And for me, it was really important to come out because after I came out, I had so many students saying, you know, Professor Summers, like, I wish I would know, like, thank you. You make it easier for me to be who I am now, you know, and just the impact that he had, I know, on my life and probably so many others, and just the quality of life that he probably has now that he doesn't have to hide it is so different. I know my situation, I love being out. It's the best thing in the world. I mean, it was so hard, like being in the closet, hiding it, and not being able to like kiss my then boy partner at the time. I mean, we broke up because of my public career that I had back in a small town of Poughkeepsie, New York, you know, where everybody looked at everything and everybody reported on everything. And so while it might have impacted his career, it changed his life. And I would suspect for the better, as being a father as well. It's definitely changed my life for the better.
Yeah. One last thought. Some people will watch this. There'll be a whole cadre of people that have no idea about this story at all that we've just told, that Barbara Walters did this in 2000 to Ricky Martin, and that push, and the really hard push that she did. First off, that's why she was Barbara Walters.
Right.
You cannot take that away from her. This is why for 50 years she trailblazed, and especially for women. But I also, I would make a mistake to not say, when you watch this is unseemly because it was a different time. But it is not a reflection that Barbara Walters was homophobic in any way. Barbara Walters was a dramatic LGBT fighter all the way back into the 60s. She commented in context time of the Stonewall riots. She talked about it and what was going on and what was inappropriate for LGBT, and was a fierce advocate for our community. So as unseemly as that moment was, that was the professional side from her, which she regrets. I love that you said, you know, I love that she apologized for it. It is not a reflection that she was homophobic or she was anti-LGBT in any way. You would make a mistake in coming to that conclusion with this story that we're telling you tonight. So finally, we queer up South Florida and Florida. The World AIDS Museum is going to celebrate at Red Gala. A new party tradition is heading south with the debut of the World AIDS Museum and Educational Center's Hunters Nightclub Red Dress Red Gala on February 4 next month, beginning at 6:30 p.m. at Design Center of Americas. This inaugural South Florida event will bring awareness to the HIV epidemic and raise funds for quality programming developed by the World AIDS Museum and Educational Center, affectionately called WAM. The red theme sets the tone for this high-energy night in Fort Lauderdale, floor-thumping tunes and an open bar and complimentary valet parking. I love that. Make it a fabulous night for all of the attendees. A VIP ticket adds a level of indulgence with a 1.5-hour reception featuring entertainment by Broadway performer Ann Steele, local sensation Lenora J., award-winning violinist the Synergy Twins, and American Idol Season 10 star Matthew Darin. VIP guests will also have an opportunity to meet and greet RuPaul's Drag Race Season 6 star Trinity K. Bonet and enjoy complimentary beverages, hors d'oeuvres, DJ, Ed, and more. All are invited to an official after-hours dance party at Hunter's Nightclub in Wilton Manors. Tickets are on sale now. Media sponsors include Lifestyle Media Group, SFBW, Outclick is participating, SFGN is participating, and of course, Hotspots and Happening Out Television Network is participating. Very happy to promote the World AIDS Museum. We just reported in this broadcast, we launched Queer News Tonight at the World AIDS Museum when it was in Wilton Manors. They are now on Sunrise. It's a great event, and most importantly of all, you know, everybody's going to have a great time at this Red Dress Gala. I'm not wearing a red dress, by the way.
I got one. You can borrow.
That's unfortunate.
Okay, I shouldn't have opened my mouth.
Red suit, maybe?
Yeah, but one of the things that's really important here is I just did the Anthony Fauci interview last month in his retirement, and a lot of people think AIDS is over. Nothing could be further from the truth. And the history of what our community has gone through. As much as we talk of COVID-19, there was AIDS, and it was a whole different kind of animal on especially gay men, but our entire community. The World AIDS Museum documents that history. And I'm very proud that the World AIDS Museum is not in New York City or in San Francisco. It's in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And it's a reflection that it deserves our support. And the World AIDS Museum continues the documentation of the endemic nature of AIDS and what we went through, because it was not only a health crisis, it was also a crisis attack on our community because of the way America and the world thought about the gay community because of AIDS. And so as a result, the World AIDS Museum will always be fundamentally important to our community and therefore deserves our support for the Red Dress Gala.
All right. Next, we are proud of our special partnership with Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church here in Fort Lauderdale. Supporting that partnership, we are broadcasting from our permanent set here at Sunshine Cathedral at the Happening Out television studios. We broadcast Sunshine Cathedral's Sunday International Service at 10:30 a.m. with more than 30,000 watching every week.
I'm Glenn Weinzimmer, founder of the Smart Ride, second largest AIDS bicycle ride in the country, and Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church.
We love the Smart Ride, and Glenn. We finished tonight's Queer News headlines with a segment we call LGBTQ plus 1 Minute News.
LGBTQ 1 Minute News, let's queer up gay culture. From LGBTQ plus news partner LGBTQ Nation and writer Kimberly Kay. History as Gay Bob was the world's first gay doll, taking America by storm in 1970s. Before the outcry against Mattel, gender-neutral dolls, and before the collecting of oak non-binary art pieces and the gifting of glammed-up drag icons, there was Bob. Gay Bob was the world's very first openly homosexual doll, and in 1977, he began shipping to homes across the nation in his own cardboard packaging. Gay Bob was clearly a grown-ass man. His pronounced nasolabial folds, sculpted chest, and blonde dye job suggested a doll in its 40s, like me. Full of the wisdom of the self-actualization, Bob wanted to live authentically while teaching other people what it meant to be out. Read more at LGBTQnation.com.
LGBTQ plus 1 Minute News, let's queer up entertainment. From LGBTQ plus Pink News partner Pink News and writer Amelia Hansford. Marvel's gay Captain America makes return ahead of major crossover event. An openly queer rendition of Captain America is finally returning to Marvel Comics, and fans are beyond excited. Aaron Fisher, the unabashedly queer Captain America of the Railways, will make his return in the upcoming 8th issue of Captain America, Sentinel of Liberty. The comic, which is set to release tomorrow on January 4th, shows Fisher team up with Steve Rogers to help bring back various heroes together after a mysterious calamity pulled them apart. The 31-page comic, written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, is set to prepare readers for the upcoming crossover event in spring 2023. Read more at thepinknews.com.
LGBTQ plus 1 minute news. Let's queer up entertainment. From LGBTQ plus partner Out magazine and writer Bernardo Sim. Kathy Griffin slams Andy Cohen over replacing her on CNN's New Year's Eve show.
Have you talked to Kathy at all in the meantime? Did you run it by her first before you accepted it? Or...
Who?
Kathy Griffin.
Who?
Kathy Griffin.
I don't know her.
The ex-host.
Oh, okay.
With Anderson.
Okay.
What do you mean? Like, she used to host it with Anderson, now it's going to be you. You're kind of replacing her, right?
Oh, okay.
Because CNN gave her the axe. How come this is news to you?
I don't know.
So you haven't talked to Kathy Griffin about it at all?
No.
No? This is a bizarre interview, man.
Is it?
Well, you don't know who Kathy Griffin is?
I'm trying to remember.
The redhead one who held the Trump head, who used to host. You're her replacement, Andy.
Anderson and I have been on tour for 2.5 years together.
Should be a comedian. On December 31st, Kathy Griffin took to social media to slam Andy Cohen for an interview he gave TMZ back in 2017, where Cohen, as you saw, was asked by a TMZ reporter about replacing Griffin on the New Year's Eve telecast for CNN. And he kept saying, "Who?" Griffin reacted to this video in a newly shared Instagram post. She said, quote, "Ugh. Every year someone sends me this clip around New Year's Eve. This guy was my boss for years. Decided whether or not I worked at Bravo. Can you imagine seeing your ex-boss on TMZ like this? Ouch. Anyway, I can't wait to watch Miley and Dolly tonight," end quote. Damn, love the read. And you can read more at out.com.
That's today's news for the LGBTQ plus community on the world's first and only daily LGBTQ plus evening news show.
If our community is important to you, share this news with your friends and family. Are you, like most of America, part of our very large television audience watching this live LGBTQ plus news broadcast right now on Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, and Amazon Fire TV?
Queer News Tonight is the only live LGBTQ plus digital television show in the world that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support. If our community is to grow, we must tell our stories and bring them to the attention of the broader world.
This is the only place in the world that tells these types of LGBTQ plus stories in motion and sound. That is the passion of Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, and Queer News Tonight.
I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and on behalf of these LGBTQ plus reporters, the anchors of Queer News Tonight, including Jasmine Pryce Lords, CJ Walden, Dr. Edward Summers, and Scott Galvin. We will see you daily at 8 p.m. And to our LGBTQ plus world, we wish you
Good night.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Lara are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.